Welcome back, families. We're going to take a look at rounding to the nearest 10. So I'm going to show you the strategy that we've been using in class. I'm going to start with the number 58. So when I'm rounding to the nearest 10, I need to decide which two multiples of 10 that 58 is between. So I'm going to start by looking at the tens place. This 5 represents 5 groups of 10, which is 50. So I know that 58 is between 50, and after 50 would come 60. A common mistake that students make is they think it would be between 50 and 80 because there's an 8 in the ones place. But we have to redirect students and just say, think about what comes after 50 when you're counting by multiples of 10. So after 50 comes 60. I then need to think about what is the midpoint between 50 and 60. Now, this is only a range of 10, and when I break 10 up, I have 5 on this side and 5 on this side, so it's kind of like skip counting by 5s. So the midpoint of 50 and 60 is 55, and I can check that by skip counting by 5s. 45, 50, 55, 60. So after I've considered what two tens the number is between and what the midpoint is, I need to decide, is 58 greater than the midpoint or is it less than the midpoint? So if I look at 55, I know that 58 is greater. I know that 58 is greater than 55, so 58 rounds to 60. Students can also, we draw this line both ways, and we can also justify 58 rounding to 60. One, because of it's higher than the midpoint, and we can also look at the distance between 58 and the two tens it's between. So 58 is 2 away from 60. And then I need to think, because this is a range of 10, 2 and what make 10? So that should be pretty easy. 2 and 8 make 10. 8 plus 2 is 10. This is a range of 10. So 58 is closer to 60 because it's only 2 away compared to being 8 away from 50. So 58 rounds to 60. Now, a common strategy that you might hear people say, they might look at the 58, they might say 8, 5 or above, give it a shove. 8 is above 5, so we round up to 60. That strategy is not something that I'm going to be using in class because that does not take the understanding deep enough. When students need to explain why 58 rounds to 60, that is not enough and it doesn't give a clear understanding. So we're not going to use any of those little rhymes or phrases. So let's take another look. I'm going to round the number 23. I first think about what two tens is 23 between. There's a 2 in the tens place, which stands for 20. And after 20 comes 30. I think about what's the midpoint. In between 20 and 30 is 25. I can check that with skip counting. 15, 20, 25, 30. I can then compare 23 to the midpoint. 23 is less than 25, so I know it rounds to 20. I can also look at the distance in between the two tens. 23 is 3 away from 20, and if I think this is my range of 10, it must be 7 away from 30. And I can check that by doing 23 plus 7 gets me to 30, or I can do 23 minus 3 and I get to 20. So 23 rounds down to 20. Let's do one more 2-digit number. I'm going to do 65. 65 is in between two groups of 10. The 6 in the tens place stands for 60. After 60 comes 70. The midpoint is 65. When I'm comparing 65 to the midpoint, I realize that these are the same number. So I can't decide if it's less than or greater than because it is the midpoint. If the number that you're rounding is the midpoint, we always round up. So we would round 65 up to 70. When students look at this, they see that 65 is 5 away from 60 and 5 away from 70. So when it's an equal distance, we round up. Let's try a 3-digit number. I'm going to try 587. When we round a 3-digit number, I really just need to focus on the tens and the ones place. Here's the hundreds, the tens, and the ones. If I'm rounding to the nearest 10, I'm just trying to get to the closest multiple of 10. So I'm going to do pretty much the same thing that I just did with a 2-digit number. When I think about what tens were between, I still can look here. This 8 stands for 80. So I know that it's between 80, but I can't drop the 5, the 500. So between 580 and 500, after 80 comes 90, 590. The midpoint will be 580, 85. Now when I go back and I look at my number, 587, 587 is greater than 585, so I know that I'm going to round up. When I look at 587, I can count 87, 88, 89, 90. I'm 3 away. When I count back, 7 and 3 make 10, so I'm 7 away from 580. This lets me know that I'm closer to 590. So I'm going to round 587 up to 590. Now, one common mistake that students make when they're rounding to the nearest 10, they try to round to the nearest 100. So when they look at this to find the two tens it's between, they see a 5 and just write 500, and then they would write after 500 comes 600. That will be the strategy when we're rounding to the nearest hundreds place, but we are rounding to the nearest tens place. So students have to be careful when they're rounding 3-digit numbers that they're actually putting the correct multiples of 10 that we're working between. Let's try another 3-digit number. I'm going to do 171. This is like I'm rounding the number 71. 71 is between 70, but I'm looking at hundreds, so 170. After 70 comes 80, 180. My midpoint is 175. I look, 175 is less, 171 is less than 175. So I know that I'm going to round down to 170. If I want to show the jumps as well, I can use that in my explanation of why 171 rounds to 170. 171 is 1 away from 170. This is still a range of 10. So 171 is 9 away from 180. 171 is only 1 jump from 170, but it's 9 from 180. So we round down to 170. Let's try 834. This is like I'm rounding the number 34. What two tens am I between? I have a 3 in the tens place, so that means I'm between 30. Don't forget the 8, so 830 and 840. My midpoint, 835, and I can check with skip counting, 30, 35, 40. Compare the number 834 to the midpoint. 834 is less than 835. I can check the distance 834 is from 830. 834 is 4 away from 830. Look at my scale of 10. I'm only 10 away. So that means This must be 6 because 6 plus 4 makes a range of 10. When I go to put my answer, 834, it's closer to 830 and it's below the midpoint. 834 rounds to 830. I hope this was helpful as you round 2- and 3-digit numbers. When students go to practice this at home, an easy way to think about drawing it is I can put the number. We kind of talked about in class how this kind of looks like a tent. This is the nearest 10, the nearest 10, and the midpoint. Those are the 3 numbers that they need to start with. Think about, is the number less than the midpoint or greater than the midpoint, and then they can see how far the 2 numbers are. I hope that this was helpful, and thanks for watching.